Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was a major achievement in filmmaking and animation. However, making a film of this nature in the 1930s was completely unheard of, and there are many barriers that Walt Disney faced to be able to make this movie. So many so, in fact, that this almost ended his entire career making this one film. Hello! Welcome to Brain Spill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and this film is a classic. I mean, who hasn't seen this movie? It is timeless. And no, I'm not going to show you a single video clip from this movie because you know that the copyright system is going to hand my ass on a platter. So we'll have some royalty-free clips instead. Walt Disney founded the Walt Disney Company in 1923, a business which started its roots making short animated films. In the late 20s, they were creative, having built up a repertoire of infamous characters like the company mascot, Mickey Mouse himself. You know the films I'm talking about, those classics such as Steamboat Willie and Plane Crazy. But with the natural progression of all things, Walt Disney wanted to elevate his game. He was making these short movies, but decided that, well, they were popular and people liked them, so why not make one of these things into a feature-length movie? Given the time and dedication it takes for an animator to make one of these movies, back in the 20s mind you, this was a monstrous task, something, like I said, which has never been done before, at the time at least. After a period of detailed research and exploration for ideas, his goal for creating an animated feature film settled on the idea of using the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a Brothers Grimm tale which was first published in Germany in 1812. Like many adaptations of established fairy tale stories, the more grisly and violent themes were removed from the concept of this movie to make it more accessible for all ages, to create this now iconic feature film. Like anyone that is trying to break into something which is completely unknown, the fact that really nobody is, as far as we're aware, attempted to do this before, you can imagine that there's a few hurdles in the way for somebody to be able to achieve this. For Walt Disney, in the making of this movie, there were many hurdles that he had to overcome. Pretty much all of which we're going to be discussing in this video. The first big hurdle, and probably one of the biggest ones of all, was money. Look, I'm not even going to beat around the bush here. Plain and simple, money. Money was needed to be able to fund and finance a movie of this scale, and if you didn't have it, then who's going to help you make it? The amount of time, effort and money it would take to make this thing with no guarantee that it would even pay off was a big gamble. There were differing opinions on the matter, with many critics claiming that animation could not hold the attention of an audience for the length of a feature film. Walt, however, studied previous movie successes and noted that feature films costing a few $100,000 could generate rich rewards from the box office. In 1928, Warner Brothers released The Singing Fool, a musical starring Al Jolson, which grossed $5 million, breaking box office records. Could his movie do the same? Despite all this and the many critics that stood in the way, Walt managed to secure a loan of about $150,000 to $250,000 to be able to make this movie, the budget for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Whilst Walt was able to acquire some of the money, he even had to dip into his own funds to be able to back the project itself. You know, if you've got a spare $200,000 rolling around, you can make anything happen. Most of the time. Look, to even talk about this is crazy because in hindsight and knowing where we are now and what the Disney company has become, we know that this movie was an absolutely monstrous success. But back in the day, it was completely unknown. This was a massive gamble. It could have gone completely wrong and this would have ended Walt's career. Like I said, many barriers. All it takes is for a few people bold enough and rich enough to take the risk. Now, I know I gave you the budget earlier, and that's the budget, mind you. The actual cost of making the movie was much higher than that. Over the course of 4 years, 750 studio artists would work long hours to create the feature-length production, costing the film a huge $1.5 million, which back in 1934 was an awful lot of money. Because of these costs, Walt and his brother Roy had to take out an emergency bank loan to be able to complete the project. This would not have been a good look at the time. This was not a straightforward production by any means, which is one reason why the cost estimate went spiralling out of control. Not only was this a new frontier, but Walt was, understandably, also a bit of a perfectionist. In a way, I sort of don't blame the guy. If you're sinking that much money into a project, you don't want to half-arse it, you want to make sure that it is perfect before release. Which leaves a lot to be desired for many movies that come out these days, which costs hundreds of millions of dollars and then turn out like complete horseshit. The first characters that the artists and animators worked on were of course the Seven Dwarfs themselves, to which he wanted them to be distinguishable on screen, not only by the design, but a way to tell them apart to be able to portray their individual personalities. So, over the course of many redrafts and many ideas coming and going, they eventually fell on the ideas and the designs of each individual dwarf, each having their own aspects and characteristics which would be unique to their personalities and, of course, the names that each of them were given. Snow White herself even went through various design changes, with differing hairstyles, colours, wardrobe, and look, I told you this guy was a perfectionist. It would be reported that the development of the movie would be such a toll on Walt that he even suffered a complete breakdown in 1935, resulting in him suffering sleep deprivation. And as you might imagine, all the critics at the time were slandering and pulling this movie through the dirt, without seeing the finished project, mind you. I mean, this would all change very soon, but there was a long way still to go before we were even in a position where the movie was ready to be shown to the public audience. As a result of this breakdown, Walt's partner took him to Paris for a break, to be able to get away from everything and just chill out for a bit. Whilst over there, he actually went and watched some movies, some of which were the Mickey Mouse shorts that he'd made, and he went to go and view what was a marathon of films. People who were sitting there and watching many clips for a long duration of time. So long in fact that it could be almost as long as a feature film itself. This was apparently all the inspiration Walt needed to go back to the studio and finish this movie. If people were able to sit and watch a movie for that long in this sort of format, then surely there are people out there that would love Snow White. So he returned to California. One aspect of making this film is not to simply put pen to paper, but if they wanted this to be as lifelike as possible, they would need to use real actors to perform and dance their scenes, which they would then use this as a point of reference to be able to make a frame-by-frame animation, effectively creating a template of sorts for the characters to use. A revolution in filmmaking used by Walt was called the multiplane camera, which was set on a rig with a number of levels set up to hold different cells to create depth and background layering, while giving animators freedom to move the cells as needed. This made animating multi-character scenes more creative and more dynamic. This looked great, with many individual moving characters making the screen an array of colour and movement. But with anything, to be able to create this, you need artists, and artists cost money. And I mean, there's only so much money to go around when you're already $1.5 million in the hole. So, the movie was being made and things seemed to be going well. And in the final scene of the movie, when the prince comes to wake up Snow White, spoilers by the way, even though the movie's almost 100 years old at this point, the prince actually shimmies on screen. An error with the animating, and if you look at the original, you can see this happening. As you might imagine, with Walt in his perfectionist ways, when he found out this occurred, he was fuming, because they'd spent $1.5 million on this movie, only for the prince at the end to shimmy across the screen. Demanding reshoots, this just physically wasn't possible. With time and budget constraints going down on the movie, this was not changed upon release, and was only changed on the remaster of the movie many years later. Walt's brother and business partner, Roy Disney, declared, "Let the prince shimmy," and so he did. This would be later changed in the digital restoration of the movie in 1993, but at the time, this just had to stay the way it was. There was only so much money left in the coffers at this point. In order to secure the funds to be able to finish the movie, Walt had to remortgage his house and sold pretty much everything he owned to be able to keep everything on track, including his car and many of his personal possessions. He had come this far and he was not going to fail now. At one stage, it was even reported that Walt had to try and convince his banker to be able to get the emergency loan, and the banker, being a bit unsure about the whole thing, wanted to see the movie. Bear in mind, this film was not finished yet. So, Walt showed him what they had so far, and the banker immediately agreed to fund the rest of the movie. Which, I mean, is pretty incredible. A, to be able to get a banker to agree to loan you money, but B, also on the basis that should have given him some confidence that there was something here. If people didn't have confidence in your product or your project, who's going to give you money for it? Despite costs being almost 10 times the costs he originally projected, pioneering many new techniques and concepts, Walt finally finished the movie, and the first screening was made on the 21st of December 1937. The movie was critically acclaimed, with reports of viewers giving the movie a standing ovation, and just to show it was going to be a beloved classic, the movie became an instant #1 hit, and would continue to keep that spot for the remainder of the year. Despite these huge risks imposed, and the great personal sacrifice that these people had to put in to make this movie happen, this paid off, and this was really the start of the Walt Disney Company we all know today. And if it wasn't for this movie, we would not have everything else we know today. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload my next video, be sure to hit the bell button. And if you've got any ideas for what topics you'd like me to discuss next, let me know down in the comments below. As always, sources used in the video will be in the description. I want to rewatch the movie now, and it's just one of those things where it's nice to go back to an old classic and just sit down and relive the good old days. But I want to watch the original version, the one where the prince shimmies across the screen. Let the prince shimmy. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.